The Laura Ingraham Show.
Press pool was given a lid for the evening, which normally suggests that Donald Trump isn't going anywhere. He's sticking around Trump Tower, but Trump apparently had other plans. He decided to go out to dinner without alerting some of his key staffers as well as the press. And it appears to be yet another misunderstanding of exactly how much gravity his new title as president-elect holds. You know, if God forbid something were to happen to him, that is a matter not only of public record, but also a matter of national security.
Don't make me have a miserable evening.
You're listening to the Laura Ingraham Show, 855-40-LAURA. We have breaking news. This is big. Donald Trump had dinner last night. And he had dinner at a restaurant.
There's a reason why there's a protective pool. There's a reason why there's not blacklisting. The First Amendment's really important, and we need to, while we fight with the Trump people about this, we need to make the public understand we're doing this in the public interest. It's vitally important for the democracy. He should just start playing by the rules. They're not going to sit at the table with him. Right. They're not going to have the camera on him. They'll be outside. It's required, not for fun.
I get that.
It's required for democracy.
I get that.
And openness and accountability.
I just think the press maybe doesn't have enough to write about right now or talk about. Trump wanted to have dinner at 21. By the way, 21, I haven't been there. You know what I used to go there with? I used to go there with Dominic Dunn from Vanity Fair. I mean, I'm talking like 1998. And it's such a scene in there. This is the kind of place you go for a probably like $50 hamburger. That's right. It's just an old haunt of Trump's. He wanted to go out to dinner. My gosh, you might as well have thought that the guy with the nuclear codes was kidnapped or something. By the way they were talking about it in the press. I get it. He's the president-elect now, and there has to be a presence of someone in the press corps, so in case something, terrible happens, that they'll know where he is and the public can be informed. I do understand that. But he isn't president yet, but he is president-elect. He has Secret Service, as a president would have today, and people want him to be safe. And in the event of some type of national catastrophe, you do kind of want to know where he is. But I do think sometimes the press gets a bit hyperbolic about some of this.
Everything changed for the presidency in the afternoon of November 22nd, 1963.
Right.
You need a press pool, and it's a protective press pool. It's not like hovering around him, shouting questions, just to follow the movements of the president.
The protective press pool. It's pretty funny to hear that. After what the public has been saying in all these polls about the coverage of this election, overwhelmingly believing the press has been biased, overwhelmingly believing the press has had an agenda, which is unfortunate. And I think in this period of time where there's not a lot of news coming out about what Trump's process is for this transition, I do think there's a lot of time to fill on television. And when you have 24-hour cable news, you have to fill the time with something. I mean, you could just start playing music or bringing bands in. I mean, that's what we do in slow news cycles. We just start going back to our cultural topics. But that's the beauty of talk radio. You don't have to be obsessed with politics all the time. It does seem like they're looking for something to criticize at all times. And it seems, are we going to retire the phrase alt-right anytime soon? This is just Drew. Have you ever seen anything like this? This is just their shorthand way of trying to demean anyone who is not part of the press cabal, the press club, the real club. They have the National Press Club, but if you're not in on their club and you happen to come at it from a more traditional perspective, then you're alt-right. Except if you're a conservative website and you hated Trump, then you're just legitimate. But this is all shorthand. We all know how this is going. We all know where this is. Oh, Steve Schmidt's on television again. God bless him. Ooh, he's all in black. There's some people who look good in open neck shirts and some people who should just stick with the tie and suit. The tie and suit I think looks better on Steve Schmidt. But what the heck? Now we have news coming out that there will be positions announced today. How many of you are worried about what you've been hearing? And remember, you're hearing this for the most part, through the filter of the press. How many of you are worried about it? 855-40-LAURA. People are all upset because Mike Rogers is not in the transition any longer. I have no idea. People are asking about this. I have no idea. I'm not going to speculate on why Mike Rogers. I know there was the concern about the Benghazi report that essentially said there was no evidence that Hillary misled the country on the cause of the attack on the annex in Benghazi. We talked about that on Special Report. But other than that, I have no idea. And Chris Christie's people are out. I mean, the Bridgegate thing was always something that was difficult. And other than that, I have no idea. I don't know. I'm not going to be here today speculating with people about why things are going in this direction or that direction. I think people have to let this process play out, take a breath, let it out, and just don't worry, be happy. At least until there's something to worry about. But my goodness, people were worried for the longest time before this election. You know what I also think? Some people, my voice has been shot since the election. Some people aren't happy unless they're upset about something, and unless they're really worried about something. You know, and I think that's kind of what's going on now. That people have been so anxious, there's been in this anxious mood for so long, that they have to find something to be anxious about instead of just enjoying the moment.
Barack Obama goes golfing nearly every weekend, either on a Saturday or Sunday. And a lot of the times he goes golfing on the base at Andrews.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And the press pool waits at the Burger King on the base. They're not following him around.
Mm-hmm.
Well, they were all excited when Brian Williams and Barack Obama were doing their planned burger runs. We should go back and find that. Those were hilarious. Oh my gosh. We're going to go back and play those just for old time's sake. Because Obama had a fairly good relationship with the press, I'd say for the first 8 years. So when he would say, okay, this is what we're going to do. We're going to show ourselves to be just regular people. And I'm going to go to, I don't know, Ben's Chili Bowl, or I'm going to go to some burger joint. And we're regular people there. Do you want to come? So he brought Brian Williams with him. And Brian Williams is sitting in the car, and they're chatting. And it was well choreographed. It was very, very well choreographed. And it was reported like it was news. And at the time, Raymond Arroyo and I had a lot of fun with it because we knew exactly what President Obama was doing. He was brilliantly playing the press. And I think he did it really well. And he had a lot of folks in the press who were more than happy to go along with the charade. And it was cool because he was the first African-American president. He has a beautiful young family, and it was new, and it was cool. And the cool factor was sold morning, noon, and night. He had the concerts at the White House. Paul McCartney was there. We had, George Clooney in and out of the White House. We had all of these parties. By the way, we watched the BET tribute to Obama last night. That was fun. I enjoyed that. That was on for an hour. I watched a lot of that. Music was great. The funniest thing was seeing Bradley Cooper there. And Bradley Cooper didn't know any of the songs. Everyone else is like singing along with the music, and Bradley Cooper's kind of, okay, I'm clapping, but I don't know these songs. But there was a cooperative relationship. There was a cooperative relationship between the press and the president. And that wasn't good. Because I would say in the beginning, especially of the Obama administration, there weren't the same types of checks and balances that the press should exist to give the presidency, as one would have hoped. But Obama played it well. So now Trump goes out to dinner, and it's an affront to everybody. To me, it's people tune this stuff out, and they tune out all the intrigue and the cabinet positions. Trump will do what he thinks is right for the country and the agenda that he campaigned on. Doesn't mean he's not going to have to probably at times compromise. Doesn't mean that everybody's going to love every move he makes. I get that. But the man has not done anything yet, and the press is already baring its teeth at him. To me, it's more of the same, and I don't really think it interests the public. Craig Shirley is going to stop by. We're going to talk to him about the history of presidential transitions and how they can be a little confusing, a little messy at times. Every president has his own path on that. And is all of this hyperventilation that we're hearing right now, is all of this warranted, given the shuffling for advantage and the strategery and all that we're reading about? I love how they monitor everyone who goes in and out of that Trump Tower, too, like it's the Kremlin. I mean, come on. Oh, maybe that's not a good joke. You know what I'm saying. All right, we'll take a break. 855-40-LAURA. As Democrats and Hollywood gears up to try to kill off Steve Bannon. I mean, they are just in a frothy frenzy still over Bannon. It just cracks me up. All right, we'll take a break. Craig Shirley, the esteemed Reagan biographer, will be with us in just a moment.
To just start playing by the rules. They're not going to sit at the table with him.
Right.
They're not going to have the camera on him. They'll be outside. It's required, not for fun.
I get that.
It's required for democracy.
I get that.
And openness and accountability.
What a stiff. What a stiff.
You're listening to the Laura Ingraham Show, 855-40-LAURA. That was from May, June 2009. Brian Williams in the back of the presidential limousine on a burger run with President Obama. So that's the kind of reporting, the tough, adversarial, we need to be a check on the president reporting we were getting back then. And they went into great detail. I mean, Brian Williams spent the whole day, it was like a day in the life of the president. And this was the kind of stuff that we were listening to. Like, he's putting his feet up in the back of the car and taking the orders from people. Hey, you want cheeseburgers? And with great detail about how they take the seal off the side of the car when it's an OTR, an off-the-record outing. And that was considered cool. But that's because you had one of the chosen reporters in the vehicle with you who was going to report it just the way President Obama wanted it. And yeah, this is what we were used to. That'll never be done for President-elect Trump. When he's president, it's never going to happen that way for him. Rarely. And I'm not even saying it should happen. If you're entertainment tonight, maybe, or something, maybe. But even then, it's turning the whole thing into infotainment. We got important issues to discuss and report on.
You're watching ESPN at night. Family's asleep. If you're like most of us, you cruise around. You stop by the cables, or you're going past MSNBC, CNN, and you see a debate underway about you and your presidency. Truth. Do you stop? Do you listen?
I have to say, I generally don't.
How can you?
Mainly because I don't find most of the cable chatter very persuasive. I've used this analogy before. It feels like WWF wrestling.
So the president in 2009 is kind of ridiculing cable news. And he's really ridiculing Fox implicitly. And it was cool. But now when President-elect Trump questions the press or thinks the press could be, oh, no, you can't do that. That's maligning the good members of the press. I think it's important that we remember where we came from and how the press has developed stories on the Obama administration. And we're going to be doing that a lot on this show. 855-40-LAURA. Joining us now, Craig Shirley, who's the Reagan biographer, is going to stop by. We're going to hold him over to the next segment as well. But, Craig, it is funny to go back and watch these segments about the burger runs and the day in the life.
Did Brian also claim that he piloted Air Force One for Obama?
Oh, absolutely, and they missed. Yeah, there's actually a scene where they're in the back of the vehicle, and Obama has his feet up, and he's just shooting the breeze with Brian Williams, and Brian Williams is just, it was embarrassing.
Two old fraternity brothers, right?
Oh, it was embarrassing. And now they're all upset because he went to 21 for an hour and a half for dinner.
Oh, God help us! The Western civilization is going to collapse.
So what about transitions and how they've been bumpy in the past? Now the new media meme. We only have a minute here, but we'll continue over the break. Is that the confusion is a cause for
Adams and
concern?
Jefferson wouldn't even speak to each other. And Adams, as you know, you're a constitutional lawyer, made the midnight appointments, which led to Marbury versus Madison on whether or not he could make those appointments as he was leaving the White House. Many presidential transitions. FDR called Herbert Hoover a timid little capon. And I hesitate to tell you what a capon is, but it's a castrated chicken fattened up to eat. So that gives you the idea of Franklin Roosevelt's regard for Herbert Hoover. Hoover wouldn't even talk directly to FDR. So you've had a lot of less than seamless traditions. Reagan ran into trouble over appointments. Bush ran into trouble over appointments. Clinton's was a disaster, was an unmitigated disaster from beginning to end. He had to go through 3 women before he finally settled on Janet Reno as AG.
Oh, I was going to say, I didn't know where you were going with that. He had to go through 3 women line there, Craig. We're going to take a break. Craig Shirley stays with us. Rick Grinnell is also going to join us. A lot more coming up.
Still don't feel responsible for what the president-elect says or does, but I do feel a responsibility as president of the United States to make sure that I facilitate a good transition, and I present to him as well as the American people my best thinking, my best ideas about how you move the country forward.
President Obama in many ways felt that he was responsible for his own actions or words. So why would he be responsible for the words or actions of Donald Trump? By the way, I'm having a lot of fun during the commercial breaks going back and looking at the old reports about Obama's. I forgot that he did the burger run with Dmitry Medvedev, to use my Russian. So he went with Dmitry Medvedev to raise Hellsburger, whatever it is. I've never been there, but it's a place that Obama likes with Greasy Spoon. He brought poor old Medvedev there, and the press just loved it. Oh, it was so fun. It was so cool. It was so outside the box. And the press was, with him on that journey. He and Biden went out for burger runs to Five Guys, and of course Brian Williams went along with them, and then Michelle and Barack had this impromptu evening stroll along the White House driveway where they were captured in kissing each other, whatever, and that was reported with this breathless enthusiasm by the press. But they really were good at setting the stage for the brand Obama, and the press were willing to go along with it for a lot of the time. And this is part of what I wrote about in the Obama Diaries, and we just had a lot of fun with it because Obama is so good at it. And the press, they were happy to go along with it. We continue with our old friend Craig Shirley. Of course, his new book's coming out in the spring on Reagan, but he's the most esteemed Reagan biographer, I think, in the United States. And how many books a year do you write now, Craig? 2? 1, 2? How many a year?
I'm averaging about 1 book every 18 months.
Oh, well, okay, because otherwise, 2 a year, you're like James Patterson. You're just having other people crank them out for you.
No, I do all my own writing. But actually, it so happens I've got 2 books coming out next year, a 4th book on Reagan Rising, and then a political biography of Newt Gingrich, which should have been out many years ago, but the publisher kept telling me, no, we want you to write this book.
So it got put off.
So it kept getting put off. So finally it's coming out.
So
But I was listening, your conversation about Obama, and I don't mean this really as an insult, but he is in many ways the nation's first Facebook president.
Mm.
And I mean that because he schooled the study of himself, like so many millennials and so many of this current generation. He's not all that well schooled in civic affairs and history and things like that. I don't recall ever hearing him quote a framer or a founder and any other president except maybe Abraham Lincoln.
Well, yeah, I think that's right, and he brilliantly used the press to advance his agenda, which
a compliant press,
and they were enamored of him. I mean, the famous, "Chill up my leg, thrill up my leg" from Chris Matthews.
Yeah, exactly. But this is an interesting historical point. when they were meeting in Philadelphia in 1787 and later when they added the Bill of Rights, you know, in the First Amendment, it's all personal. It's right of speech and right of assembly and right of petition. It's all jammed in there. Is the right of a free press? And it wasn't that the framers liked the broadsheets and the tabloids of the time. They hated the press. They despised the press, but they saw the press as a valuable ally of the people against the government, which is why they thought it was important enough to put in the First Amendment. And it worked for basically 200 years. John Kennedy complained about the New York Herald Tribune. FDR complained about McCormick. Abraham Lincoln had editors who displeased him, jailed. John Adams had editors who displeased him, jailed. But it worked up until this time. The last 8 years is the first time the press was in league with the government against the people, and that was a very dangerous trend.
Well, and I think that it is important for the United States to have a press corps that is objective, but is tough. I mean, I always liked the old 60 Minutes. The old 60 Minutes. Remember when 60 Minutes used to do real investigative reporting? It was fabulous.
Yes. But grown to replace that now is you and Sean Hannity and Fox News and conservative websites. Is that you're now the new adversarial press? You're fulfilling a constitutional goal set 230 years ago by the framers. Is that, you know, isn't it interesting that for the last year, the Washington Post has been editorializing against Trump, reporting against Trump, columns wrote, and yet you and Sean and others say, hey, Trump's got a chance, you should listen to this guy, you should pay attention to this guy, it's not over. And so you're proven right, Sean's proven right, Mark has proven right, all these other, you know, conservative news sources are proven right. So where should we go to, based on that empirical evidence, where should we go to for our news and information? Should we go to you or should we go to the Washington Post?
Well, that's interesting. The email I got yesterday from an old friend I hadn't heard from in a while. It's funny how you hear from people that you haven't heard from in a while. You know,
always every 4 years. Sure. I wonder why.
Yeah, when the news is as it is, and he said, given what systemic failures there were in big media and in their projections and the pollsters and the consultancy, there are all sorts of organizations that rate doctors and lawyers, and it is interesting. There's no such.
They're regulated. They're by professional organizations.
It's interesting that there's no such organization to rate the objective press. I'm not talking about websites that are come at it from a point of view. I mean, LifeSet has a more traditional point of view.
Right.
It's not. It doesn't pretend to be objective.
Brent Bozell's MRC does a terrific job, reporting on. I don't know if they actually rate the press, but it is a good point.
Yeah, I mean, I just think it's at some point, if you're wrong more times than you're right, why do you keep?
There should be some consequence to it, at least an economic consequence.
Yeah,
but of course, look, is that subscriptions for New York Times is running in the red, has for years. The Washington Post is running in the red, has for years. Is that eventually the free market is going to take hold and these publications will be out of business?
There is a soundbite from yesterday where Barack Obama, overseas in Greece, was addressing a few questions from the press. They had a press conference. And this is what he said about one of our favorite topics Craig and I have been writing about for years and years and years, populism. Let's listen.
I do believe, separate and apart from any particular election or movement, that we are going to have to guard against a rise in a crude sort of nationalism or ethnic identity or tribalism that is built around an us and a them.
What about that, Craig?
He doesn't know American history, obviously. Is that populism is very similar, as we both know, we've written about, very similar to conservatism. It's essentially a philosophy against bigness because of the corrupting influence of bigness, whether it's big government, big media, big labor, big Hollywood, big universities. It's just that we know from history has told us, from the time of illicit pharaohs up to the czars up to the present, is that bigness brings about corruption and the diminution of personal freedom. So we must guard against bigness, and that's very that was infused in the Constitution. the whole federalism philosophy of the U.S. government, our whole history. Is that FDR ran against the bigness, the corruption of Wall Street. Is that Ronald Reagan ran against the bigness of Washington. Is that populism has a long honored tradition in American history, and Trump is the evidence of that.
What happens to the websites like National Review, and they were warning against populism and from a different perspective than, of course, President Obama.
Well, National Review ought to be really, they got to take a long, hard look at themselves because, Bill Buckley once said, and this quote, he said, "I'd rather be governed by the first 1,000 names in the Boston White Pages than by the entire faculty at Harvard." What is more populist than that is to put your faith in the people instead of the elites. He railed against big corporations. He railed against the power of GM. He railed against big government. And for National Review to then go off on this elitist neocon direction is a shame because Bill Buckley was anything but.
And he was one of the. I remember meeting him for the first time in the offices of National Review. I think I was 18 when I was at Dartmouth, right. And it was with Dinesh and a couple of other folks from the newspaper. And my gosh, he was like the rock star for me. You might as well have met the Beatles.
Sure, it was too. I met him as a child. My father was the chairman of the Onondaga County Conservative Party in upstate New York, and either Bill or Jim would come every year for a fundraiser. And when I was in junior high school, a friend of mine and I were at this fundraiser, and my friend went up to Bill and said, "Mr. Buckley, I'm the chairman of the Bill Buckley fan club at Clary Junior High School." And Buckley looked at him and said, "That must be the smallest club in your school."
Yeah, that the geeks, like the math team and you. And,
yeah, right. The AV club.
Exactly, the AV club. Craig, it's always great to talk to you. I cannot wait till your next book comes out. Well, we're going to talk to you many times before then, but thanks so much for giving us more of a historical perspective on how things are going. Everyone's hyperventilating. Nothing's happened yet. Chill out. Just give things a moment.
Focus on Thanksgiving.
Oh, my gosh. I can't wait for Thanksgiving. I'm so excited. Craig, I'll see you soon. Talk to you soon. Give my love to Zoran, please.
All right. Thanks, Laura.
All right. We'll take a break on the Laura Ingraham Show, 855-40-LAURA. A lot more to get to. Don't go away. You are listening to the Laura Ingraham Show, 855-40-LAURA. Drew, explain what happened there. Donna Brazile is getting a lot of heat because of her supposed collusion.
Yes, she was basically kind of saying that CNN went a little overboard by not letting her explain herself. That was what her comment was saying right there.
Okay, so
CNN, she's saying that CNN just let her go without having any facts, didn't let her explain herself. She wanted to come in and explain it to the executives at the CNN.
Oh, because they let her go.
Right, without asking her, without confronting her about it.
Well, they have
But they had some WikiLeaks emails and some evidence.
They have emails that indicate that the questions were being leaked from CNN through her to the campaign, to the DNC, to the Clinton campaign, whatever it was, but it was bad. And I don't know.
Questions bad.
Yeah. So, I guess you could call her in and have her explain it, but she was on with Brett Baer just calling him boo-boo the whole time and saying, "I'm not looking at those emails. Don't infect me with those emails."
Them Russians.
The Russians. Now, Raymond and I said that goes down as one of the funniest interviews of this entire election season. So Brett Baer says, "Well, there are these emails, Donna, and I just got to follow up on. Next time, don't bring out any of those the viruses." And I'm like, "What? That's a piece of paper. What are you talking about?" I was just howling, laughing. It's like, now she's still trying to explain herself. And this is coming from me. Fourth time you couldn't find it. This is coming from me, who actually likes Donna Brazile, as she could not be a lovelier person.
Let me ask you something else.
I answered the question, Boo.
What
you
is
want
Hillary
me to open up
Clinton? No, but
my
about
files.
No, she comes at the very end of the exchange. She keeps saying, "Don't get any little fictions at me. Don't want to."
No, boo-boo. And next time, don't bring me no emails unless you have cleaned your system, okay? Don't bring nothing corrupting to me. But you and I can always have a decent conversation. And
okay, we can always have a decent conversation, boo-boo. But they actually will get away with this with some journalists who are not wanting to check the journalists. Has there been a really serious piece done by a mainstream journalist on the collusion between certain journalists and the Democrats in this last election cycle. Jay, try to find an objective piece that had been done by a mainstream media outlet on the collusion factor. I mean, because if the journalists exist to act as a check on power, shouldn't there be some journalist who takes it upon herself or himself to be a check on the press's power? I think there should be a vigorous press, and it should act as a good faith and aggressive check on unbridled power in America. Absolutely, that's fine. That's the way it should be across the board, without regard to political parties or what your last name is. That's fine, but then do it to your own members. Especially if they're working hand in glove with a political institution or a political player or a campaign or the DNC. We had reporters from Politico and journalists from CNN who were doing this nonsense stuff. Listening to your healthy radio addiction, the Laura Ingraham Show, 855-40-LAURA. Mike Rogers answering questions. We'll play more from this on the Laura Ingraham Show. Former congressman, of course, and former head of House Intel, answering questions about why he was removed, basically, from the transition team. A lot of people thought he would be a good fit at CIA or NSA. Some even, I think, mentioned him perhaps for the Department of Defense. But nevertheless, he appeared on CNN last night answering multiple questions about his removal from the transition team. I haven't followed the intrigue of the transition team. I'm about the ideas of the Trump presidency and looking at all these challenges America has in the world and at home, of course. And one person who knows the landscape, unlike most others, that we're going to have to walk through carefully at the United Nations and other international organizations is an old friend of mine. When I say old friend, it sounds like we're just a bunch of old fogies. But I've known Rick Grinnell for, I don't know, Rick, like at least 15 years, maybe longer than that.
Oh, come on. 15? It's way longer than that.
It's way longer than that. Oh, I was trying to make us younger. But Rick, of course, Fox News contributor, former director of communications, public diplomacy for the U.S. ambassador to the United Nations, and his name is being bandied about as ambassador, U.S. ambassador to the United Nations. He knows where all the bathrooms are at the UN and more, and he joins us now. Hey, Rick, how are you?
You know, I just quickly calculated in my mind. Well, I think it's been 23 years.
23 years that I've known you. Oh, and the good thing is we just keep looking better and better as the years go by.
Yeah,
and
you were like some high-powered attorney. And I was just a spokesman on the Hill.
That's
for
right.
A congressman who was unknown at the time named Dave Camp, who climbed his way up and became chairman of the Ways and Means Committee.
Was Dave Camp from Michigan? I'm trying to remember.
Yeah.
I don't even know how I remember that, but that's right. You were with him. And I was working at Skadden Arps. I was one of those just burrowed away litigation attorneys after clerking for Justice Thomas. So Rick, let's talk about first of all, let's go through the intrigue and the transition. It's a little awkward because you and I are both being mentioned for positions, but I think that the press just doesn't have anything to talk about right now. So this is kind of all they can talk about is turmoil in the transition, as if that's never happened before.
Newsflash: Washington types want jobs and are maneuvering for power. I mean, come on. This is what happens in Washington: is that people, talk about their power and they maneuver, and reporters, there are a couple of people who were talking about how, the transition asked them for names and then they got offended because the names, were never Trumpers and they were upset by it. I just find that all to be such a Washington silly game. I mean, the fact of the matter is that I think that most reporters got it wrong because they listen to the same people and they do the same thing, and they don't understand that the American people decided to get their news from somewhere else. If you were literally just listening to the mainstream media, there's no way you would have voted for Donald Trump. So what does it tell you? It means that the American people have decided to dismiss the Washington political media, and they're getting their media from somewhere else. I want to point out one thing, Laura, because in case you're White House press secretary, which I think you would be fabulous for, you have to remember that Barack Obama also went around the mainstream media. Remember when he brought 3 YouTube bloggers in? Those YouTube bloggers are not political people. They have a reach of 20 million new Americans that never watch what the Washington Post or New York Times says. But those people got subtle messages about their health care and that Obama was fighting for them. One of the reasons why Barack Obama's, I think his popularity was high is because he gets that you got to go around these guys. And a lot of times Republicans have mocked that. I think it's a smart move, and Donald Trump totally did that in this election. He decided to speak directly to the American people. You've got Facebook Live can go around the New York Times. You don't need their filter, and you don't need to wait while they file a story. You can go directly to the American people with talk radio. You can go directly to the American people now with Twitter. This is an issue that the mainstream media are panicking because they no longer have the death grip on the information to the American people.
Well, I think that's right, and I think Obama played it really smartly, and he also used the traditional media to help brand himself, the First Lady, the entire apparatus at the White House.
Yes, he got a twofer because they were for him, and he went around them.
Right, and it was the cool factor, and right up until the very end. And we're going to be doing a longer segment on this later on because it's kind of fun. That BET did this farewell to the Obamas that aired last night. I mean, this was just over the top. It was hilarious. I mean, Dave Chappelle, when he was on Saturday Night Live, was joking about it because he said he went to the White House and it was all black people. And he said it was so cool because it was all this disenfranchised people. And then there was Bradley Cooper, who clearly didn't know any of the words to any of the songs and was like clapping along. Everyone's singing every lyric. And Cooper's just kind of the cute white guy, like clapping his hands. But it was done as it was done in the beginning, to brand the Obamas as this. It's a powerhouse political couple, but also a cultural statement that was really, I think, helped him as he pushed his agenda.
Yeah, there's no question that the mainstream media and the pop culture media in Hollywood were tripping over themselves to take whatever line the Obama administration says. One point, though, is that President Obama his leadership and his policies were such a disaster that penetrated through even Hollywood. I mean, I think you saw the Obamacare rollout. You saw the Syria disastrous policy and the red line mistake. All of that even penetrated into Hollywood, where people were beginning to complain that, gee, he's really cool, but he's not a very good president. And I think then the American people will be able to pick up on that. I have to credit Twitter because Twitter is now a place, and Donald Trump mastered it, where you go directly to the American people with a message, and you go around the mainstream media, and the mainstream media hates it.
Joe Scarborough this morning on Morning Joe, I think this was when he was discussing various members of the Trump cabinet and would-be members, and lots of concern over one in particular. Let's listen.
I think Rudy is causing an extraordinary amount of problems inside there. Going around shooting his mouth off to the Wall Street Journal. He's putting Trump into a corner, even though he wouldn't even mention Donald Trump's name throughout most of the Republican primary as somebody that could win until after he won New York.
And that, I mean, we've heard this repeated over and over again in the press today about Giuliani. And they're mentioning, I guess, his various consultancy gigs with foreign entities and so forth, and $200,000 a speech. What do you make of this?
Look, I think the fact of the matter is that Rudy Giuliani is a great American who has done so much work for this country, and I can't imagine that questioning his loyalties to Trump or to the American people in any way is going to stick. I mean, people know this guy as a strong defender of the United States. He was out there, post New York City mayor, and utilizing his expertise in security, cybersecurity, and helping countries. He was actually pushing a product or a service that was making their lives safer and all of our lives safer. I find it to be ridiculous, and any comparison to Hillary Clinton is laughable. She was giving a speech, about bringing down the borders and having, one global world. And Rudy Giuliani was out there consulting for countries and for the Olympics on how to make life safer for their people.
Mm-hmm. And, I think the idea is that from the same people, most of the people who got it wrong before the election, what they say is it would be bad for Trump just to bring in a bunch of loyalists. Like, well, what was he supposed to bring in? People who are actively working against his agenda? I don't really quite follow that.
Of course, what they want is they want a team of rivals. They want, they're pressuring Trump to say, now that you won and you have this big, huge mandate, you should bring on your team people who are against your mandate because you're going to look better in our eyes. That's what the argument is. And it's the typical Washington way. Look, they're panicking. The political media are panicking. Lobbyists and all of the insiders in Washington are panicking because they lost. And Donald Trump is going to focus on bringing in people who have the expertise, who are willing to take the hits and create change and push for change and do exactly what he said. I think he has the possibility of being one of the greatest presidents because he is not committed to the system. He's committed to making issues that furthering issues that impact people's lives, and the American people see it. It's why he won states that are traditionally blue. We now have, like Reagan Democrats, we now have Trump Democrats. It is truly a movement.
By the way, Rand Paul is also not happy. And by the way, I think my friend from Kentucky texted me that Donald Trump received more votes than Rand Paul in Kentucky. More votes for President-elect Trump than for Senator Paul. But we like Rand Paul a lot on the Laura Ingraham show. He always comes on the show, but there, he thought Trump was unfit for the presidency too. Remember, his comments were brutal toward Trump. But let's listen.
I think Trump should pick a Secretary of State that agrees with his foreign policy. And the thing Donald Trump said over and over again was that he was opposed to the Iraq War, and he learned that lesson that regime change in the Middle East was not a good idea. And yet I don't see Giuliani coming out with statements like that. I certainly don't see John Bolton. I think both of them have been big cheerleaders for the Iraq War and for more intervention in the Middle East. So I hope Donald Trump will pick somebody consistent with what he said on the campaign trail.
Isn't there something to that? Going back to the neoconservatives, and Bolton is certainly one of them. And again, I like John Bolton a lot too. But what of that? Is that a repudiation of Trump's own statements on the Iraq War? That's the concern.
I do have to say that listening to Rand Paul, I love the fact that the Republican Party is so diverse now. We're really having a thoughtful discussion about foreign policy and where we go. Having more ideas is so much better. And I think that the policy has been in flux since the Bush administration as to the effectiveness of regime change. And I think that he's got a great point, Senator Paul, when he says, you got to learn from the mistakes. You've got to see what happens, and you can't stick to this ideological push and not learn that the Iraq War in many ways was a disaster.
Oh my God.
And yet, what are the lessons and where do you draw the line? I have to say, because I know John Bolton really well, that John Bolton, first of all, is brilliant. And I can tell you that from the beginning, his Iraq policy, if he had his way, was much different than how it unfolded. John Bolton is focused on American security and what's best for America. He's not someone who wants to have a coalition provisional authority inside Iraq building it up and making all the decisions for the people. He definitely has the idea that if we can support democracy in another country from afar, if we can help do whatever we can to encourage them, that's the right policy. But if they don't rise up themselves, we can't do it for them. And I know John Bolton well enough to know that's his policy, and that wasn't how the Iraq War unfolded.
Rick,
so I think...
Yeah, so you think just the concern is largely overblown and unwarranted?
I think it's a healthy concern. I think that we need to continuously look at the policy that both men have some good ideas, and we need to be open to constantly improving the policy and changing it.
Trade deals, foreign policy. Yeah, trade deals, foreign policy, economic decisions. It's not like they're all written in stone. I mean, the people want change, and he campaigned for real change from the establishment way. I appreciate it. Rick Grinnell, you'd be fantastic at the United Nations, just absolutely fantastic for so many reasons. We really appreciate your taking some time. We'll take a break. Don't go away. To the Laura Ingraham Show, 855-40-LAURA. Harry Reid yesterday on the Senate floor, and he's been going on an absolute rant against Steve Bannon. He likes to go after individuals on the Senate floor. He did that with the Koch brothers not so long ago, and he's typical hyperventilation. I understand that Nancy Pelosi had to delay the vote for House Minority Leader. It was going to be held this week. Now she's delayed it to the end of the month. Why is that? Is there some type of revolt going on against Nancy Pelosi? The media are focusing on the Trump transition, so-called turmoil. But the real story for the reporters who are interested in covering it, I think, is the current circular firing squad that is the Democrat Party. And the Republicans have gone through the same thing. And maybe it's time to scrape the barnacles off the bottom of the boat and bring some new leadership in, some new blood. Steve Moore is going to stop by. I'm going to talk to him. He was instrumental in setting up Trump's economic plan, specifically his tax reform plan, and the market continues to skyrocket. Don't go away.
Exciting opportunity that the American people have given us to work and go do the things that are necessary to get our country back on track. Our members are excited about this opportunity, and we're going to continue working in the weeks ahead to lay out and plan that first 100 days and then the months after that are going to be so critical to moving this country forward again, rebuilding the middle class that spoke out so loudly, and finally getting our economy and our country back on track.
That's Steve Scalise, by the way. House, is he the majority whip? I think so. He's whipping it up. And he, I believe, met with Pence as well, met with Pence. And he was holding up a Make America Great Again hat, which was pretty funny. Did you all see Nico in his Make America Great Again hat? Did you guys see it on Facebook?
Absolutely.
Did I post a little video? It was like 3 seconds. Oh, the thing is, when he walks, he sings. And he just makes up songs. So his song that he was singing at Baltimore Washington International Airport when we all piled out of the Southwest flight from Hartford, he goes like this, Trump, Trump. And he sings it. I said, what is that? I said, you're making up all these songs. Trump, my friend, Trump. And he just starts doing that. I'm like, you have a future as a rapper. I mean, he could be like a clean rapper, though. We don't want any of the bad language rappers. Joining us now, when I think of hip-hop or rap music, the first thing that comes into my mind is Steve Moore. From Heritage Foundation, Wall Street Journal, Washington Times. We read him everywhere. He was one of the chief architects of Trump's economic plan. He joins us now. Yeah, I see you, Steve. You're moving to the beat of Drake and working out with your spandex. And how's everything going, Steve?
This has been the best week of my life, and by the way, great little story. So, you know who Paul Krugman is, right?
Yes, the New York Times lefty Uber columnist.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
And he's probably the most influential liberal economist in the country, I would say. And anyway, so remember the stock market crashed the night of Trump's victory, and then of course we had this massive rally the next day, and it's been on a Trump rally ever since. But anyway, so after the stock market crashed that night, Paul Krugman was on TV and he was asked, Dr. Krugman, when will the market recover? And Paul Krugman said, never. And of course, 2 hours later, we had the biggest boom ever. These liberals just don't get it. And this is going to be the most amazing. Yeah, I got to tell you, Laura, that the stuff that Donald Trump is doing on the economics, and he's not backing away from this. I mean, the tax cut, the repeal of Obamacare. Don't count out the importance of of what he wants to do with the school vouchers, which is huge. I mean, he wants to take virtually half. This is so great. Almost half of the Department of Education budget, which has been wasted for 30 years since Jimmy Carter created the damn place. And he wants to just give that money right to low-income parents so they can choose their own schools. I mean, even Ronald Reagan didn't propose that. I mean, that is an amazing thing. So this guy, he's going to go out there, I think, and these guys want to move quickly, and I can't tell you how excited I am. I think we can make this economy double in its growth rate, at least. I think we get to 4 or 5% growth. And, we're going to, and my priority is to bring those jobs back to Michigan, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, those places in the Midwest that were forgotten, neglected by Democrats.
Let's talk about some of the pitfalls as all the positives exist also out there on the horizon. Tell us what happens as an economist with rising interest rates. We've had interest rates kept artificially low because the Fed is just out of ideas. I mean, they've tried to they're printing money, keep the interest rates low, and that's all they had to do. There's nothing else they could propose except doing that, and it didn't work. So now what?
Let me explain. And this is important. It's a great question. Why have interest rates started to rise since Trump won the White House? And the answer, this is actually good news, because what's happening is all of a sudden everybody wants to invest. Everybody wants to invest ahead of this, Trump economy. And so, as people want to invest more, there's more of a demand for capital that drives up interest rates. Look, we've had, almost 2% interest rates now for 10 years and hasn't stimulated the economy because, Lord, nobody's wanted to borrow and invest. Who wants to borrow and invest when Obama's raising taxes, Obamacare, minimum wage increases, regulations? As we release the economy from those burdens, you're going to see a huge increase in the demand for capital, more investment by businesses, more savings by people. So in a kind of paradox way, this rise in interest rates is the first sign of a real coming boom. And by the way, the stock market has been rising as interest rates has been rising. That's normally you don't normally see that, but that's a good sign that people are becoming very optimistic about where the economy is headed.
There was an interesting piece, I thought, in the Daily Signal the other day about how it's time to stop tax benefits and tax dollars from going to people like Elon Musk, of course, who heads up SpaceX, Tesla, and also other cronyism that the federal government is engaged in. What is your thought on that?
Well, a couple points. First of all, I believe one of the reasons the Democrats lost touch with working class Americans and they got routed in industrial states, I think they sold their soul to this radical climate change agenda. And it turns out, guess what? Americans want jobs. They care a lot more about jobs and their incomes and their kitchen table issues than they care about climate change. So when you look at the big losers in this election, Paris, what do they call it? The Paris Accord or whatever that thing. That's history. We're not going to do that. We're going to shut down our energy while China builds, hundreds of coal plants. I mean, it's crazy. That's number one. Number two, we want to clean out all of the stables of the tax system, get rid of all those special interest provisions. And can you think of a bigger loser in this election than Tom Steyer and Elon Musk? I mean, Elon Musk thought the federal government was going to buy 500 million solar panels from him, because remember, that was Hillary's plan, 500 million solar panels.
I don't think, by the way, in looking back at the campaign, I don't think enough was made of that. That all of these Solyndra, I think Trump mentioned Solyndra one or two times that I recall, but I think the sheer number of just scam investments the federal government did in these companies, in these initiatives, in leasing hundreds of thousands of square feet of office space that is yet to be occupied by Homeland Security, miles of office space that is just a complete waste of money. Those examples are really poignant, I think, and upsetting to people because everyone's on a budget and they're worried about their own families. So I think keeping people up to date about how the federal government's spending is being cut is really important for you guys. I just think that's critical.
Let me give you an amazing example. So I was over with the transition office a couple of days ago. You know, my friend Ed Follner, that former head of the Heritage Foundation, is running the transition. That gives you an indication of how conservative this president is going to be. And we were talking about this thing that Elizabeth Warren created, the, what do they call it, the Consumer Finance.
Consumer, FBF, yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, so I was saying, gee, let's downsize this. And I said, how many people work there anyway? And the guy who was following, he says, oh, there's 16. And I said, oh, there's only 16 people there? And he goes, no, not. He said, not 16, 1,600.
What?
Did you know? There's 1,600. They're building a $300 million office building.
Get rid of it.
For CFPB. Get rid of it.
Get rid of it.
That's the first thing we can cut. But can you imagine 1,600 of these people? I mean,
Consumer Financial, isn't it Consumer Financial Protection Board? Rich Cordray, who I knew 20 years ago. Rich Cordray was head of it, right? Is he still head of it?
You got it.
Yeah, okay. Well, I've known Rich for a long time.
Unbelievable. But that's how these agencies just grow like weeds. Nobody's even watching them. And by the way, that agency it's being challenged to the court. It's not even responsive to anybody. I don't think that the president.
It's probably unconstitutional. Yeah, it's probably unconstitutional. It doesn't respond to any branch of government. It's just operating independently without much of a check or balance. Yeah, I mean, there is so much like that. When I used to work at the Department of Education, and this was back for Bill Bennett in 1986, 7. I remember getting there as a 22-year-old kid, arriving there, and I was like, there are all these floors. It's on 400 Maryland Avenue, okay, Southwest. I remember walking around going, what is all this? Like, what do all these people do? Thousands. And they said, oh, that's not the only building. There's another building.
Right.
And I was just a kid. I said, what? Why do we need so many people at the Department of Education? You had the bilingual education. You had all these acronyms. Same thing at the Department of Transportation where I worked. You had UMPTA, Urban Mass Transit Association, UMPTA. Yeah. And everyone throws around these acronyms. It's just hilarious but disturbing.
Well, another example is the Agriculture Department. So we have 50% fewer farmers today than we did 50 years ago, but we have like a 200% increase in USDA employees. I mean, what's going on here? It's the old joke that every USDA employer has one farmer that he represents. I mean, it's unbelievable, the bureaucracy. And people who say you can't cut government, oh my God! I'll give you another example. We just found out the other day the HHS has admitted that there's 56 billion with a B, not 56 million, 56 billion dollars of fraudulent Medicare payments every year. 56 billion.
Medicare fraud.
And nobody does anything about it.
Well, the Justice Department's supposed to be.
I'll give you an amazing example. Do you know what the fraud rate is at Visa? It's like 1%. It's 12% in the federal government. It's 1% in the private sector.
Steve, I have a suggestion, and I think maybe I mentioned this to you before, but people understand, regular folks who just are trying to take care of their families, they get the need to cut waste, fraud, and abuse. But it's always talked about in general terms. And I think a Trump SWAT team that is hired, like you would hire McKinsey and Company, to go through each department and agency, cut this, and then you report to the people every month. These are the various departments we cut and why. This is how much we're saving you. To me, that would be just powerful and really refreshing for people to say, okay, they're updating me on what they're doing. Draining the swamp means cutting waste, fraud, and going after the abuse, period.
I love that idea. And, when Reagan came into office in 1981, I don't know if you remember, he created something called the Grace Commission. And they went through every agency. It was all private sector people, went in, and they found hundreds of billions of dollars of waste. And by the way, that was back when hundreds of billions was a lot of money. And now I would love to see, bring in somebody like a Carl Icahn or a Fred Smith who runs Federal Express and go through these agencies and just identify the duplication. Do you know we have 28 job training programs?
Oh, my God.
28?
Now, Steve, before we let you go, I have to ask you about this because a version of this article has been written many times that good jobs aren't coming back. The Atlantic did a piece on this. In the last several years, some American companies have moved their operations back to the States, but the resulting factory work isn't providing the prosperity and security that such work once did. Automation, other advances in technology, and so forth. It's never going to be the way it was in the 1950s when your dad or usually back then it was your dad, went to work at the factory and that was just a guaranteed pension and you were there for your whole life. That's just not the way the economy works anymore. So when Trump says we're going to bring back the great jobs, is that really possible with mechanization and automation?
Oh, look, the economy is changing. If you go into a factory today versus like a car factory 30 years ago, there's no question there's more automation and technology that makes workers more productive. No question about that. But I'll give you just one example. We estimate, these people say we can't bring jobs back. That's ridiculous. We estimate that we can create 6 million new jobs in the energy sector over the next decade by using our oil and gas and coal. That's just 6 million jobs. That's more workers in Michigan and Pennsylvania combined, for goodness sakes. And I was giving a talk last week right after the election, and I said to there's a business group, and this one gentleman said, I recently moved a factory with 300 workers out of Pennsylvania, and we moved to China. And I said, why? And he said, it's because of the taxes and the regulation. I said, sir, if we get our tax rate down to 15%, and we get rid of some of those EPA regulations, would you bring that factory back to Pennsylvania? You know what he said, Laura? In a heartbeat.
Well, they want to have. It's not like CEOs want to be overseas. Yeah. They don't want to be on a plane to Beijing either, and it's fraught with all sorts of other problems. Steve, a lot of people don't know how much you worked for this victory, and your ideas and your counsel to Donald Trump was so critical. And we just appreciate your efforts. You're one of the smartest people I know, and you spent hours and hours and hours and hours every week pounding this
Let me just do a quick shout out to all the people. I met so many. I had the time of my life, by the way, and I met so many great people across this country. I mean, my faith in this country was restored by traveling with Donald Trump and just seeing the amazing people in this country.
Awesome.
I'm just pumped up.
I know you are pumped up. I love it. Steve Moore on the Laura Ingraham Show, 855-40-LAURA. Stay with us. Tonight I'll be on Special Report. Make sure to tune in, and on Life Zet, picking Trump's Pentagon chief. Sessions over Bolton.